everybody. My name's Charles Martin, and I'm from the Australian National University, and I'm here to present this research, which is called Intelligent Agents and Networked Buttons Improve Free Improvised Performance Ensemble Music Making on Touch Screens. So my co-authors are Henry Gardner, Ben Swift, and Michael Martin, who are also from the Australian National University. So in our group, we design touchscreen apps for making improvised ensemble music. This is a kind of music where there are no boundaries about what's played. So each performer is responsible for choosing the notes they play, what notes to play, when to stop playing, and also when to actually end the performance. So we've been exploring how to enhance these performances by connecting these devices over a network and by analyzing the touch activity of each performer. We use these connections to change the players' interfaces throughout a performance, rewarding them, surprising them, or challenging them with new interactions and new sonic material. So in this graphic, you can see some of the different kinds of performances which we've been doing. These have included professional concerts, like on the left, performances that include different kinds of instruments, such as percussion instruments, and also impromptu jams just with inexperienced users. So on the bottom right there, there's some users from a makerspace who showed up during a workshop. So our apps are designed around simple percussive interfaces where performers can tap and swirl on the screen to produce sounds. This app that's on the screen right now is called phase rings, and each of these rings represents a different pitch that the performer can play. I'll just play a little demo of how phase ring sounds. So these apps are designed for exploratory performance, exploratory improvisation. So the idea is that they only present a small number of sounds or pitches that the user can access at one particular time. And throughout the performance, this set of sounds is updated so that the performer has new sounds to explore. And you can see that halfway through that video where it switched to a new setup of rings. These updates can be triggered directly, like through a GUI button, or indirectly through some other kind of interaction, perhaps over a network with other performers in the group, or over a network with software-based agents. So we've designed our apps so that these updates happen simultaneously for all members in the group. This means that during an improvisation, the performers are staying together, exploring a sequence of harmonic spaces or soundscapes. So in particular, we're interested in performing with what we call ensemble director agents. These are server-based systems that can analyze performers' actions during an ensemble performance and make high-level contributions in that performance, much like a human ensemble director or a conductor would in an orchestra. In our previous work, we've designed an ensemble director agent that uses machine learning processes to classify the performer's touch gestures and then uses transition analysis to identify and react to moments in the performance when the performers have moved on to a new musical idea or they're interacting in certain ways. So anecdotal evidence from our concerts suggests that our ensemble director agent is actually helpful in these performances, and the performance experience is enjoyed by the players and the audiences alike. But in this research, I want to ask whether such a system really improves the performances. We think that this is an important question because music is a very fundamental mode of collaborative expression. Group music making is not just used for entertainment, but also used in education and healthcare. And we think that touch screens are actually ideal interfaces for exploring computer music. But however, with a few exceptions, touchscreen apps for music making really emphasize the individual performer's experience rather than the whole ensemble at once. So we hope that our work can help to connect the performers in an ensemble in all kinds of musical situations. Now, most evaluations of new interfaces for musical expression, like ours, actually take place in a qualitative setting, but we've taken a quantitative approach with this particular work and designed a series of controlled studies to address this question. So our controlled studies take place in a recording studio with groups of 4 performers. Each group of performers performs 4 improvisations in each session under different conditions. And we gave these performers written surveys after each improvisation. We also record UI data and audio and video from the performances, as well as open-ended discussions after each session. So this methodology of performing and reflecting on successive improvisations under different conditions is actually very similar to some rehearsal situations that you might encounter for training in improvisation or developing a new work with new kinds of instruments for improvisers. So because this resembles rehearsal situations, we call this methodology rehearsal as research. Now in this particular study, we investigated two different factors corresponding to two fundamental designs for networked interactions during performances. So as I said before, in our app, there were these interface updates which give performers a new set of notes as well as a new sound color, so a new timbre of sound. The two factors were agent control and GUI control. And under agent control, an ensemble director agent tracked all of the ensemble's touch data at once using techniques from our previous work. And this agent triggers updates for all devices in the ensemble when it detects a moment of high gestural change that could correspond to the performers exploring a new musical idea in their performance. Under the GUI control factor, these updates were controlled by the performers themselves by tapping on a GUI button in their interface. You can just about see the little button in the lower iPad screen. So if one performer presses this button, the update is sent over the network so that all devices in the ensemble would be updated with the new notes and sounds. This kind of system is often used in computer music and sometimes called a local performance network. We created a special version of our phase rings app specifically for this study, and this allowed us to create a 2x2 factorial design for the study. This version of phase rings allowed the GUI control and agent control factors to be switched on and off remotely, and this gave us 4 experimental conditions. Nothing with no agent and no button, button only, agent only, and both where both the button and the agent were simultaneously active in the performance. In this study, we had 16 participants, which allowed us to have 4 ensembles. And that meant that we could present the experimental conditions to the ensembles in counterbalanced order. So these participants had all studied music, but only one in each group actually had previous experience with our iPad apps. Now, improvisations are very complicated phenomena, and they're difficult to evaluate. We know that. But we think that there are ways of evaluating performances through questionnaires, and we wanted the players to actually assess their own performances in this study. So we've taken inspiration from surveys that are used for assessing improvisations in music education research. And although these are used for improvisations, they're generally used for jazz improvisation. So we're applying these surveys to free improvisation instead. Now, we designed a survey that assesses the performers' perceptions of each improvisation, and they consisted of 24 9-point like-it-style questions that covered 5 major aspects of improvisation: technical proficiency, musical interaction, musical structure, creativity, and performance quality. So at the end of each session, we also surveyed the performers on their overall preferences among the 4 conditions and had a brief discussion with them about their experiences throughout the different improvisations. So before I discuss the results, I'd just like to play a short video that explains some of the music that we've been playing in these sessions. encouraging to note that even though this study was conducted in order to evaluate these improvisations systematically, the performances weren't lifeless or unmusical in any way. Now I'm going to talk about the main results of our study. So we analysed our survey results using the ART ANOVA procedure to establish significance for the main effects of GUI control and agent control, as well as interaction effects. So what we found was that the GUI control factor had significantly higher ratings in 9 questions with p less than 0.05. The performers felt that they were more technically proficient with the GUI button, they felt that their performances were more complex, and they felt that creativity and overall performance quality were higher. So these plots, each plot shows the distribution of results for each question where we found that there was a significant effect, and you can see the button and both conditions in the second and fourth column of each plot. Those were where the GUI control was active, and you can actually see in that rating of technical proficiency that there's quite a pronounced increase under GUI control. So overall, the both condition tended to have the higher ratings, and the none condition tend to have the lowest ratings. In the none condition, performers were actually stuck with the same set of notes that they got at the beginning of the performance. There was no way to change it. And this is something they generally didn't like having, but some of them actually found that this challenge was stimulating in a creative way. So there were no questions that showed a significant effect for the agent control factor or any interaction effects in this, this initial study. However, we also measured the length of performances in this study, and we actually found that agent control performances were significantly longer with p less than 0.001. So I know that generally in HCI, when we record task completion, usually lower is better, but in this particular instance, we thought that higher was better because that perhaps indicates that the engagement with their interface and with the group was higher under this agent control condition. So you can see the agent control conditions, agent and both on the right, and you can see how much longer these performances were. In our study, all of the performers started improvising at the same time, but they were free to stop playing whenever they wanted after 7 minutes had elapsed in the studio and up to an upper bound of 11 minutes. The lower bound was indicated to the performers with some coloured lights that you can see in some of the videos, and the upper bound was indicated by turning the loudspeakers off when they got to the end of 11 minutes. So we measured these performers' finishing times individually, and we actually think that the length of the performance can be related to how engaged they are with the app and the ensemble. Now, there's one interesting little point that I want to point out about the GUI control factor. We found that some performers actually used the button a lot more than the others in the groups. So while the median number of button presses was 3.5 per performance, the maximum number of button presses was 457. And this was seriously unexpected behavior. We really didn't expect them to press the button so many times. So we called these particular performers who went sort of more than 100 button presses in a performance button maniacs. And we actually found that they were using the button to create a new kind of sound, not just to disrupt the performance or any other reason. So I'll show you a little bit of what this looks like. So that guy on the right had definitely caught button mania at that point of the performance. He was tapping the button quickly and continually, and it creates a really unique sound. I think you could hear that the sound of the synthesizer parameters getting changed rapidly was really unique, and the button maniacs enjoyed that sound. So unfortunately, because the button updates were sent to each iPad in the group, when someone became a button maniac, they really took over the group experience. So they completely dominated the ensemble. And although this unanticipated behavior was quite creative, we really enjoyed hearing it, we thought that the effect on ensemble interaction was undesirable. So that brings me to the thing we did next. What we did next was we ran a follow-up study. We actually wanted to try to develop a new interface, taking on board the creative use of our interface that we had in the first study, and taking on board the results, which suggested that GUI control and agent control factors both do support these performances. They do improve the performances, but they do so in different ways. So the both interface, even though that had both on at the same time, that seemed to be most successful. However, because there were button maniac performances, they could take over these performances, and we thought that the always-on button was a little bit of a undesirable factor. So we wanted to try combining the best aspects of both these factors, and we created one extra interface to use in our follow-up study. This interface interlaced the effects of the button and the ensemble director agent, and the performers controlled their own app updates with the button, but this was only available after the agent has identified a moment of structural change in the performance. So the way this works in the fade interface is that in the first phase, there's no button available, and performers have to make do with the notes they have. That's in the left graphic. So when the agent identifies that there's a new section in the performance, it would enable the button, and the button would fade in on everybody's screen in the performance. That's the second phase. When one performer taps the button, then it would update every interface in the group, and the button would disappear. So the agent here is suggesting these changes and by enabling the button, and then the performers accept the change if they want that to happen by tapping it. So the performers are under no obligation to tap the button if they don't want to, if they're happy with the sounds they've got, or they just don't want to change, but we found that they generally did. So we ran our follow-up study with an almost identical procedure to our first study. The both interface was identical, and the new fade interface was with that arrangement that I just described. So these two conditions involved both the agent and GUI buttons, so we didn't have the two factors that we had in the previous study. And our goal here was to find out whether the fade condition improves these performances. So this study used the same procedure as the first, but actually only involved two groups of performances, 8 performers, and these performers had all worked with our system before. As there are only the two conditions, we had these groups perform twice with each, and the order of those performances was alternated between the two groups. So the results of the follow-up study supported our fade interface, and we had 6 questions in our questionnaire with significantly higher ratings for the fade interface. These included musical interaction, musical structure, quality, and enjoyment. None of these questions showed significantly higher ratings for the both interface. So this result supports our hypothesis that the fade interface would improve performances. However, the performers were actually split on their preference between the button, both, and fade interface. They told us in interviews that they thought that these interfaces were probably both useful and that each one would support a different style of interaction within the ensemble. The button maniacs in particular really wanted to stick with the both interface. So there was also no significant difference in performance times for these two interfaces. So this sort of suggests to us that both of these were equally engaging to the performers, and at least with these groups. Now, in conclusion, summary, this was the first formal study of an ensemble director agent in performance, and we've shown quantitative results that show which aspects of performance were improved by the networked button and which aspects were improved by our agent system. We think that it was particularly significant that the duration of performances was improved or lengthened by the agent control factor, because this was an objective measure, and it was actually one that the performers themselves were not aware of during their performances. So once we'd identified that this was really making a difference, I started to ask the performers in the interview, which one do you think was the longest? And they really couldn't tell us. They were quite unaware of the relative length of these improvisations during this study. So we actually think that the duration of performance is worthy of further investigation, and we plan to do so in our future work. So our methodology for examining ensemble improvisation is also a contribution of this work, and we hope to refine the process of rehearsals research, our questionnaires, and the other measures in future work. Finally, our results led us to develop this new interface, the fade interface, which we have shown improves performances. And we plan to continue using all of these interfaces in concerts, educational contexts, and further HCI investigations. Now, all of our touchscreen apps, including phase rings, which was used in the study, are available for free in the iTunes App Store if you want to have a go, download it, or you can come up. I've got my iPad with me, so you can try it out. I encourage you to give all these a try, and the source code for all of our apps and agents is also available on GitHub. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much.